What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to 10 for 10 presented by Lunchbox and Brett NBA. 10 for 10 is a segment where we talk about 10 different sports subjects across the NBA and the NFL in roughly a 10-minute span, speaking on each topic for just about 1 minute. But let's stop wasting time, man. Let's hop right into this video, man. Starting with the first topic, we're going to start off in the NBA today. We got Devin Booker was snubbed from the All-Star game. Now, Devin Booker, being the only thing relevant in Phoenix except for this year with Chris Paul coming in, has been the lone bright star and spot in Phoenix for years since entering the league. He had that infamous 70-point game versus the Boston Celtics, and Devin Booker's been one of the brightest young stars this game has seen and one of the best backcourts and honestly all of basketball, along there with CP3 right now. But Devin Booker was rightfully snubbed from the All-Star game until Anthony Davis was officially swapped out with Devin Booker as well. LeBron James, even on the record, who is teammates with Anthony Davis, came onto the record and said that Devin Booker has been one of the most underappreciated guys in the league after the announcements of Devin Booker not making the All-Star team. And like I said, once they swapped him out, there was a lot more respect and it was a lot better. But Devin Booker should have made the All-Star team firsthand, but good for him and good for Devin Booker, one of the best young players in the game right now. And speaking of All-Star snubs and guys being swapped in and out, now moving on to the Eastern Conference and in the second topic, Domantas Sabonis, another controversial guy who was snubbed originally of an All-Star spot, who ended up being on Kevin Durant's team in the draft night last night with the NBA All-Star selections, who was then swapped out for Kevin Durant, who's kind of been dealing with some COVID issues, hamstring issues, and of course he's just coming off that Achilles injury, so Kevin Durant was swapped out for the NBA All-Star game in replace of Domantas Sabonis, who's having a career year with the Indiana Pacers, a guy who was traded on draft night from the Orlando Magic, who was drafted to the Oklahoma City Thunder, and now of course he plays in Indiana. Domantas Sabonis is one of the better young power forwards, centers, whatever you want to clarify him as, in the game as well. And Domantas Sabonis has played very well this season, very deserving of that spot. Like I said, it was very controversial he didn't make it, but he's on the team now. Kevin Durant's been swapped out. Good for Domantas Sabonis and good for him. Now moving on to the next topic, I want to talk about a big controversial issue that's been going on in the NBA, not just this year, but in recent years, but it's really heightened as well, with NBA officials really taking over games with all these technical fouls and the soft era of basketball that we are playing in. Now look, the era of basketball that we're playing in is a lot more spaced out, a lot more three-point shooting, and it's not as physical as a game like it was in the 90s with guys like Karl Malone, Charles Barkley, Shaquille O'Neal, and a handful of others. But today's game has gotten to the point where players are getting tossed out for JJ Redick bouncing a basketball to an official, getting teed up, Montrezl Harrell getting a technical foul for yelling "and one," Donovan Mitchell getting tossed out of the game and getting 2 technical fouls versus the Philadelphia 76ers, and Devin Booker getting tossed out of the game versus the Los Angeles Lakers. Now look, I understand players not disrespecting officials and officials having a limit, but when it has gotten to the point where you cannot breathe, bounce, yell "and one," or you cannot do anything to disregard an official or to even trigger them in the slightest, that is where the issue has been drawn. And if you watch the Jazz game and if you watch the Suns game, these are two small market teams with players that are up and coming and superstars in Donovan Mitchell and Devin Booker. You do not watch Jazz games for not watching Donovan Mitchell. You don't watch Suns games if you don't watch Devin Booker. You cannot be doing this if you're the NBA. I'm sick and tired of the era that we're playing in, and it's getting too soft. I could go into more details about that, but that's just something I wanted to hit on, and I just don't have enough time to describe it right now. Moving on to the fourth subject, I do want to talk about LeBron and Kevin Durant's All-Star selections. As I mentioned, Kevin Durant will not be participating in the All-Star game, but he was the captain. Now look, I think the big controversial issue, because nobody really cares about the actual selections of the players and whose team's going to win. We'll see that when the All-Star game actually happens. Of course, it's always just a fun game. But the issue I have with this is the fact that Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert were the 2 last players taken, and I don't think that was by mistake. You saw LeBron James taking shots at Rudy Gobert when Domantas Sabonis, Donovan Mitchell, and Rudy Gobert were the only players left on the board, and LeBron looks directly in the cameras and said, "I need some size on my team. I'm going to take Domantas Sabonis." And then LeBron takes a joke at the Utah Jazz afterwards, who currently have the best record in basketball, sitting at 27-9 heading into the All-Star break, and explains to Charles Barkley and the rest of the TNT crew that he didn't take any of the Jazz players and they were the last 2 players taken off because nobody likes the Utah Jazz. Nobody cares about Salt Lake City. Nobody cares about Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. And look, for an All-Star game, I understand why Rudy Gobert's not taken and why he is taken last, because he's a defensive player. He's not an offensive player that makes the game fun, and he's one of the more hated, controversial players in the NBA, even though I don't think that's deserved. But at the end of the day, I think LeBron's trying to send a message. I think he's trying to spark a fuel fire for the Utah Jazz, and I understand that they're not the glitz and glamours like LA, Brooklyn, Miami, etc. But LeBron knew what he was doing. Moving on to the other subject, and the last subject in the NBA, Blake Griffin has agreed to a buyout with the Detroit Pistons. And even though he's not the same player that he once was back in his days with the LA Clippers and Lob City, Blake Griffin at this point in his career is just a fancy name who's overpriced and overpaid at this point in his career. Now look, he has been in a bad situation with Detroit, who's not a good franchise, not a good organization, does not have any great young players, to put it plain and simple, for the most part. But he's agreeing to a buyout, and now he's looking at teams that are contenders like the Clippers, the Brooklyn Nets, and the Los Angeles Lakers. I think the Clippers reunion would be cute. I think it's a nice story. He's got to patch that relationship with Steve Ballmer, the owner for the Los Angeles Clippers. But him moving to the Brooklyn Nets, I think would be an amazing fit for him. I think he fits much better on that team with the spacing. And the Brooklyn Nets, dude, he would just be a fifth option, and I think that fits Blake Griffin very well at this point in his career. Even though he's not the high flyer that he once was, Blake Griffin could be a serviceable guy at this point in his career, being a fourth or fifth option behind KD, Kyrie, Joe Harris, and James Harden, of course. Now moving on to the NFL. Speaking of pay cuts and everything like that, Big Ben Roethlisberger just took a $5 million pay cut to restructure his contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now look, I understand that Big Ben wants another opportunity to go and win a Super Bowl while this Pittsburgh defense is still alive, but I don't think Big Ben's the guy to get the job done anymore. We kind of saw a similar dip in his game this year, even though they started off the year 11-0, 12-0, correct me if I'm wrong. And they were one of the best teams in football until they had a 5 or 6 game spin where they just completely fell off the wagon. Big Ben had a similar dip like a Drew Brees as well. I think he's a good regular season guy. I just don't think he's that much of a game changer anymore. He's just barely better than a game manager at this point in his career, I would say. He didn't really have a run game with James Conner, but that defense was live. They could lose Juju Smith-Schuster in free agency. You still got Claypool, you still got Ebron. Let's see what they do, but this Pittsburgh team I don't think is built to win. And honestly, Big Ben's not even a top 2, top 3 quarterback in this division anymore. Moving on to the next NFL topic, I want to talk about JJ Watt choosing the Arizona Cardinals. Nobody, not even people that were near JJ Watt, except for him and his agent, really knew where he was going to go when JJ Watt signed with the Arizona Cardinals. JJ Watt even made it publicly announced that he believes in Kyler Murray, and that's the reason why he wanted to go there with a young, electrifying quarterback in his third year. And of course, DeAndre Hopkins had a big influence, his former teammate, the best wide receiver in football, if you ask me, in his influence to come to Arizona as well. And Arizona's a pretty well-run organization, unlike Houston, who's been contaminated with a lot of garbage and a lot of BS in the last couple years, and especially with all the drama going on with Deshaun Watson. We're going to have to see how that handles out, and I'll get onto that in a minute. But JJ Watt, I don't buy that he actually went to Arizona because they're going to be contenders. They might not even win their division because you still got Seattle, San Francisco, who's going to get healthy. And of course, you've got the Los Angeles Rams, who are still a very good team as well. Let's see what the Cardinals do, but I really think he went there for the $23 million in guaranteed money that he was going to get. Now, speaking of Deshaun Watson, we're still going to have to see how that plays out with the Houston Texans because Deshaun Watson has been on the trade block as of recently that we all know of. He signed that 4-year deal last year, and he's only entering the second year of his contract, but the problem is the Texans have not built a steady organization around Deshaun Watson. They have not listened to him, and they basically rebutted everything that he has said and pushed him off to the side as well. That organization is absolutely dysfunctional right now, if you ask. And everyone should want to trade for Deshaun Watson except for a handful of teams. But the problem is the Texans are refusing to trade Deshaun Watson. They are not really listening to calls, which is idiotic. They could be getting an absolute haul for Deshaun Watson right now with the draft capital that they could be receiving, but his value is only going to depreciate if he continues to sit out, which I believe he will. Jalen Ramsey said that he would sit out, but we're going to have to see because they do share an agent. So let's see how the Deshaun Watson situation plays out. Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence, something I also wanted to get in on. The top 2 draft quarterback prospects in the NFL draft, according to a lot of analysts. Personally, I think Justin Fields is still the number 2 quarterback in this class behind Trevor Lawrence, who's the presumptive number 1 overall pick. This man has been the number 1 overall pick since a junior, senior in high school, back in Cartersville, Georgia, coming from a small town. Everybody knows Trevor Lawrence was going to be a special talent, the next Peyton Manning, the next Andrew Luck, when you ask a lot of these NFL scouts and a lot of these NFL players as well who want to play with Trevor Lawrence as well. Allen Robinson making comments as well about him being a prodigy. I don't understand the argument for why some of these NFL analysts are out here debating whether Zach Wilson is the best quarterback in this draft class. I think that is an absolute blasphemous take, and I think the audacity that these people have to come out here and report on Zach Wilson coming out of BYU, who had a fantastic year, 33 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 3,700 yards, is not Trevor Lawrence, okay? The size, the athleticism, and the skill set that Trevor Lawrence has had since his days in college and now heading into the NFL, even though he's had left shoulder surgery, is absolutely ridiculous. I think it's an indictment on the Jacksonville Jaguars organization. If the New York Jets had the number 1 overall pick, this would not be a discussion. Let's not get this confused. Trevor Lawrence is still the number 1 overall pick, and he's still the best quarterback in this draft class. Now, Russell Wilson has made it clear that he has 4 team trade options that he would welcome a team trade to if he was traded from the Seattle Seahawks, which would be the Raiders, Cowboys, Bears, and the Saints as well, which I think are all a good fit in their own different perspectives. Even though the Bears offensive line is not that great, Russell Wilson's still one of the most elite quarterbacks in this game. He's only 32 years of age. He's still got another good 8 years left in him when we've seen these guys now playing into their 40s like Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, and Tom Brady as well. Still at a high level. Russell Wilson needs to get some protection though if Seattle's going to keep him. I think he still ends up in Seattle this year, but let's see how that situation plays out. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate all the support. Make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe down below if you guys enjoyed the content as well. I'm going to link to my socials and the other socials as well in the description down below. Make sure you guys like. It only takes a moment and it helps the channel out tremendously. But that's it for this video. Thank you guys so much, and we'll catch you guys next time. Peace!